Nomination in 1983 for Outstanding Achievement in Music and Lyrics, and in 2011, readers' poll in Rolling Stone magazine said that the song was voted the best television song of all time. And then in 2013, the editors of TV Guide magazine said that Where Everybody Knows Your Name was the greatest TV theme of all time. Now, I don't think it is just because the song is so tuneful. It is fun to sing. But I think people really want to go where everybody knows their name. For those of you who did not watch the television show, a little info. Cheers was all about a nice little Boston bar where owner Sam Malone, a former baseball star, and a slew of other colorful characters, Norm, Cliff, Dr. Frazier, Carla, Woody, get together for a few hours every day. They talk about life's problems, they laugh at each other's flaws, and they support each other in times of trouble. A little like our joys and sorrows in a Unitarian Universalist church. For those who did watch the show, how many of you watched the show? Oh my gosh, it happens in every UU church. I was a real fan. And I just learned that you can watch it streamed online on CBS. Of course, wanting to do due diligence to prepare for my sermon, I have to admit I watched all of the 10 free programs that you can watch. Because you can sign up to access for CBS and watch all 275 of them. So if you did watch the show, do you recall that when an episode begins, a big burly fellow comes through the door and says something like, "Hey everybody," and what do the people yell back? No. Yes, all right, that's great. Every single time. This brings a smile to my face, it brings a tug at my heart, and I'm pulled right away into the story, like it's my story. I used to have a really great memory for names. In my younger days, when I was a director of religious education for a church with more than 100 children, I remembered not only their names, their parents' names, their grandparents' names, and their pets' names. Wow. Alas, no more. I'm now 70, and I have to go with the flow here, and that it is one of the first things to go, the memory for names. Even here sometimes, so if I don't call you by name, even though I've met you a number of times, I will forget names. And maybe you do. Or maybe you've yet to meet some of the people here. I'd like to invite you now, if you're comfortable, to join me in a little exercise. Don't worry, there are no memory tests to be given. If you would like to participate, find a partner. Can be anybody, probably somebody you don't know, but if you're sitting right around everybody that you know, that's okay too. And decide which one of you is going to speak first, and then which one of you will speak second. And I'm going to ring this chime, and you will have 1 minute, only 1 minute, to tell your partner something about your name. It can be your first name, your middle name, your last name, a nickname, whatever name you choose. So I'm going to ring the chime. Partner 1 tells the other partner something about their name for a minute, and I will ring the chime again. And then you'll switch, and we'll do it again. Partner 2 will tell something to partner 1 about their name. Okay. Everybody got a partner that wants a partner? And if you don't have a partner and you would like to participate, you can raise your hand and somebody will come to you. like the best part of the service, though, you know. I hope you enjoyed that. And so next time you see the people that you've been talking to, you'll know their name, perhaps you'll remember their name, and maybe a little bit more about them. Here's another little tidbit about the Cheers Bar. Founded in 1969 as the Bull and Finch Pub, this fun, dark-paneled pub inspiration for the television program, Cheers, is just a couple of blocks from where we used to have our headquarters for the UUA, 25 Beacon Street. How many of you have been to? I know Tom's been there a bunch this time. This is nice that many people in this congregation, in this setting, have been to Beacon, or we used to call it 25. They knew us, and we knew them very well. They knew our leaders by name, and we knew theirs as well. I drink out of my Cheers mug every morning, with my soy vanilla latte. So, speaking of church, because I'm always speaking about church, I love church. If I weren't a minister, I would still be active in a Unitarian Universalist church somewhere, as a lay leader, as a Sunday school teacher, as a greeter, maybe just holding babies in the nursery, and probably volunteering in social justice, maybe even singing in the choir. By the way, did you know that singing with others releases pleasure-producing endorphins as well as oxytocin, which lowers stress and wards off anxiety and depression? Also, singing with others bonds people together in a unique way. Quite literally, as it turns out, studies show that the heartbeats of those who sing together actually beat together. Feelings of connection and trust arise. Group singing has been shown to lessen feelings of loneliness, which is what we do here. Several times, every Sunday, we get to sing together with our hearts beating in tune. And can you imagine if this choir didn't have choir? I mean, they'd be running unruly through the streets. Yeah, but we have made a place for them. Of course, we've all heard that the percentage of the population attending church has drastically declined, and churches and other religious organizations have been trying to figure out why. From these studies, they've come to some very interesting conclusions. They found that it is not from the lack of belief in something larger than themselves, which some people call God. In fact, the surveys repeatedly tell us that people still do believe in something that's more important than just themselves. One of the biggest reasons for the diminishing of people attending church, it seems, is that people report they're just too busy. And many are getting their social needs met in other ways, they say. But that might not be so true. They may not have any kind of social communication at all. And that's a problem. More people report that they are lonelier than ever before. When asked if they have people in their lives, close friends or community members, who they say they can tell their joys and sorrows to hear them, to know their names, much less anything else about them, it's falling. It's drastically falling. You may have read, too, about the rise of addictions in our population lately, opioids especially, drugs, alcohol, and other kinds of addictions as well. One of the most likely causes for addictions is loneliness. In an experiment, a rat is put in a cage, all alone. It has nothing to do but drink a drugged water, which is in a drip feeder in its cage. In another cage, one rather lush, filled with colorful balls, everything a rat about town could want. It also has a drip feed of drugs, but another drip feed has only water in it. The startling thing was that the rats with the good lives, who were living in the fancy dorm, did not like the drugged water at all. The experimenters thought this might be a quirky thing about rats until they looked at something akin to what was happening in human development. It seems that during the Vietnam War, Time magazine reported, the use of heroin was as common as chewing gum among the U.S. soldiers. A full 20% of the soldiers had become addicted, and the Army was terrified about what that would mean when they would return home to their lives and their families. But it seems that 95% of them simply stopped. A few of them, of course, with rehab. They had, it seemed, shifted from a terrifying cage back to a pleasant cage. And that was what was so interesting to me. The discovery is a profound challenge both to the right-wing view that addiction is a moral failing caused by too much hedonistic partying, and the liberal view that addiction is a disease taking place in a chemically hijacked brain. In fact, addiction is an adaptation. It's not you, it's your cage. So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is human connection. Why not just go hiking on the woods on Sunday, commune with nature, or join some other social or civic organization? That'd be pretty good. Well, for one thing, there are not many of those old civic organizations thriving anymore. My dad was a moose. And church provides many of the benefits of those organizations right here under one roof. There are certainly non-attending church folks who are self-motivated and find ways to tirelessly serve in their communities. But many of us don't always follow through on that intention to get directly involved with a charitable giving or an organization, unless we're encouraged to do so by people at church, perhaps with people from church, like contributing money to help the homeless. We all think it's important, but if the congregation does that together, somehow it fills the coffers. Perhaps here we are acknowledging what I like to call that something larger than ourselves, by whatever name you want to give it, for a purpose much larger than ourselves. We engage in social justice here because it's the right thing to do, and because for reasons beyond our heads, the reasons are in our hearts. A. Powell Davies, one of our most important Unitarian ministers, great speaker, renowned social and political activist, who spurred the growth of our faith in the 1950s, said, "Church is a place where we go to grow our souls." In my reading about why people go to church, much of what I found was in many Christian blogs. Of course, reasons given involved statements of faith or belief in God, taking the sacraments perhaps. However, there was much more about connection. One young woman's story could just as well have been told by anybody here. She mentioned coming into the church building, hearing her name called out. Catherine, Linda, there we are. Someone knows our name. Followed by a hug, both of which really are placeholders for conversations that may unfold today, this week, later this month, who knows? She said, "We engage in all the small talk that precedes our heart talks." She continued saying, going to church, the phrase going to church kind of bugs her. Because we don't go to church, we are the church. And even though it's messy and imperfect, even though I've let them down, she says of the others in the church, even though there are disappointments, even though I don't always agree with everybody, and they probably think I'm crazy too, sometimes, even though I don't think we need an official Sunday morning thing to be part of coming to this church, Perhaps here we cross a lot of our self-made boundaries. I keep choosing this family, this church, out of hope and joy. Does this sound familiar to any of you here? It certainly is an important thing to me. She mentions, too, wanting to reclaim the heritage of her faith, Christianity, which could be just as well said about our keeping alive the heritage of this congregation, the heritage and history of Unitarian Universalism. And finally, these two reasons, which mean something to me personally. One, she says that when she falls short of her ideals, she can practice, she can learn, she can start all over again. It is amazing grace. And two, people here pray for you. Yes, even in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. To me, this applies to our spoken joys and sorrows. It applies to the time we spend meditating and in quiet time with each other. It applies to when we hear ourselves and we hear others into being. In this broken and often disheartening world, this church, this intentional community, this plain old church feels like a radical act of faith, and sometimes like a spiritual discipline. We show up, we talk to each other, we listen, we light candles, we sing together, we have some coffee, cake, donuts, potluck sometimes. We remember who we are. We remember who we are as a people, and as a people of faith. Why we live this life the way we do. We do this because we are the love people. We who stay together, we will find our way, where everybody knows your name, and we're awfully glad you came. Amen, and blessed be.